All three of the Abrahamic religions teach that lending to the poor is an act of compassion that serves the entire community, and therefore, charging interest was seen as immoral. It was called usury and was considered a heinous crime. The Roman Empire allowed usury, but in 1179, the Catholic Church decreed that usury was forbidden. This law did not apply to Jews. While the Torah admonishes usury, Talmudic law allows a Jew to practice usury with a non-Jew, and so money lending became primarily a Jewish business. Over the years, usury became more accepted in Western society, and we've changed the definition with the addendum of charging interest at an excessive rate. In the 17th century, the Bank of England began issuing paper fiat money. This gave the banks the ability to simply print money out of thin air. And for over a century, this was rightfully called out as fraud until it became public policy, known now as fractional reserve banking. What was once seen as immoral is now seen as normal. Many assume that the financial loans given out by the banks are coming from savings they hold for their depositors. But this is not true. When someone takes out a loan, the bank creates new money out of thin air and then charges the person interest to borrow it. Fractional reserve banking allows the banks to legally create 10 times the amount of each deposit. This inflating of the circulating currency devalues that currency and allows the banks an opportunity to profit dramatically. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 began a system of debt designed to inflate beyond its means until it implodes, the exact opposite of sound money. The banking cartel funded both sides of World War I, which led to the Great Depression, which led to the Emergency Banking Act of 1933, which ended the gold standard and made every dollar spent an IOU to further increase the debt, which is ultimately owed by the American people. The banking cartel funded both sides of World War II, which led to the Bretton Woods monetary system, which made the USD the world reserve currency, and gave central banks the option to go straight to the gold window of the US Treasury to exchange US dollars for physical gold. But by endlessly creating more debt, it became clear that the US had printed far beyond their gold reserves. And when several nations came to collect their gold, the federal government dishonorably closed the gold window. To maintain world reserve currency status, the US turned to its military, guns for hire to Saudi Arabia in return for the petrodollar, and war with any nation who threatens USD dominance. A Ponzi scheme is an investment fraud that pays existing investors with funds collected from new investors. And that's what the bankers created. They profit exponentially off the people's debt. It was designed to collapse, and that's what it's doing now. All the markets are crashing, and the derivatives market alone is in the quadrillions, which is much more than the total financial assets of the entire world. There is nothing left to prop up the dollar. This Ponzi scheme is at its end. What that means is that the money you have in the banks will disappear. Everything will go to zero, and then we reset. How we do that will ultimately be up to the people. The banking cartel knows that the only way they can survive this collapse is to somehow convert everyone to an authoritarian CBDC. But without the people's trust, the banks will have problems with this. Many people will lose everything and will want nothing but justice from the old banking system. But many others will comply. Hard times are coming fast, and if we were smart, we'd prepare. Let the big banks die and create.
We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world.
The dollar, the last known superpower of the US, is coming to an end. Today, US dollars represent about 60% of the value of all the currencies in the entire world. But that trend is also changing.
The dollar looks like they're dumping it.
The world's largest oil producer, Saudi Arabia, is reportedly asking to join BRICS.
As more and more developing nations, including some of the world's largest economies, decide to ditch the dollar in their bilateral trade, voices of concern and even despair are being heard in the US over the looming end of America's global financial dominance.
McDonald's temporarily shut down its corporate offices across the U.S. today ahead of expected layoffs. The Wall Street Journal reports the company told staffers to work from home through Wednesday while they inform people of their status. It is part of an effort by the fast food giant to become more efficient. McDonald's stock was mostly flat in today's trading after hitting an all-time high last week.
Walmart is laying off more than 2,000 warehouse workers, including some right here in Florida.
The cuts are happening in Texas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and the Sunshine State. The company recently told investors to expect slower sales and profit growth in the year ahead. Walmart's core lower-income shoppers continue to be hit by inflation, which could impact sales. The retail giant is also raising its average minimum wage from $12 to $14 an hour. That could squeeze profit margins. Walmart is America's largest private employer.
For a long time, these tech companies felt like almost the safest place to work. Employees were well looked after, well compensated, great perks, and suddenly that's been turned on its head. And I think it's been a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of employees at these companies. Maybe they're not the big kind of happy family that they thought they were. My name is Hugh Langley. I'm a correspondent at Business Insider, where I cover Google and tech. I think the layoffs are happening for a multiple number of reasons at the moment. The reason these tech CEOs are citing mostly is the potential of a looming recession. The other one is that through the pandemic, these tech companies really went through this sort of hyper growth mode where they just hired and hired and hired. Consumers were at home, spending more money on digital services and goods. So they got incredibly competitive with the workforce. We were all writing about, the battle for talent. There was a little bit of naivety there, and maybe some of them knew it was going to come to an end, but it was the case that they couldn't miss that opportunity. Like, we need to do the same, because in 2-3 years' time, we don't want to be the company that doesn't have that talent. And now those good times have kind of come to an end. The other reason is investors are just putting so much pressure onto these companies right now to trim these headcounts. So now they're having to react by cutting some of this headcount that they've added in the last couple of years to try and appease investors. We've seen the layoffs hit so many tech companies. All the big ones, Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, have slashed tens of thousands of jobs. Salesforce, we've also seen it down to kind of medium and smaller tech companies as well. Spotify, Zoom, Uber, GoPuff. Amazon's cut around 27,000. Meta's about 21,000 so far. Google and Microsoft have also cut around a little over 10,000. The cuts we're seeing are happening across a lot of the company right now. Areas you'd expect are kind of getting hit hardest: human resources, recruiting, for example. It's hard to say exactly what these cuts are going to mean for the broader economy.